Well then, you've seen the title. For a little bit of context, I'm a day one Star Rail player who's been free to play the entire time. I've never spent anything on this game, and I only pull for E0 S0 units so that my showcases can be as relatable as possible. And I have waited a while to give my opinion since I didn't want this to be someone complaining about the fact that they can't clear endgame content anymore. And for a bit more context, I've been able to fully clear every endgame mode from 2.1 to 2.7, but when 3.0 came back, although I was able to clear the most recent Apocalyptic Shadow in 3.1, I have found myself struggling a bit, and I do feel like it is mostly because of either poor / increasingly scummy game design. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to have a chat about it, see what some of the issues are. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at each individual endgame mode, starting off with Memory of Chaos since I feel like that's the one people care about the most. And just talk about some of the issues in each endgame mode, and then come together to talk about some of the overarching issues in Star Rail at the moment when it comes to being free to play, power creep, HP inflation, stuff like that. I don't really want to complain about the same things that everyone else is because I feel like it's been done to death, so I hope I can provide some new perspectives, especially as a person who's only ever been free to play in Star Rail. So yeah, with that being said, let's just hop right into it. Alright, so here we are looking at the Memory of Chaos. Now one thing I should note is that on this site you can see some of the future Memory of Chaos as well, namely the 3.1 and the 3.2. I'm not going to be covering those because I don't really want to spoil them. For Memory of Chaos I won't be looking at the HP chart because I think it's easy enough to see the HP trend just by looking at the totals at the top. We will just get the elephant out of the room. HP inflation. I don't want to spend too much time talking about HP inflation because, everyone's already spoken about it before and it's also just really obvious to see. But, if we just take a real quick look from a couple of months ago, let's say here, back in single target, you had 6 million HP and 3 million HP. And this is after characters like Akron as well as Firefly have already been in the game. Before Fei Xiao, who would probably be the other part of the big three from version 2. Whereas now we have characters like the Herta, who is probably the other meta-defining unit. Aglaya, you could say, could be up there, although I'd probably put the others slightly above her. But, yeah, if we just see here 6 million and 3 million in AoE, it's kind of similar in the next Memory of Chaos. Kind of similar here, once again, just slightly more AoE focused, but, it wasn't really an issue. Yunli released was a destruction character, so it makes sense. And then here we see the HP going up a bit. It makes sense because Fei Xiao did release, so, it's kind of understandable that the HP will go up. And here we start seeing it go up a little bit more, but it's not insane. And then all of a sudden, with the most recent Memory of Chaos in 3.0, we all of a sudden have an increase into 15 million single target and 12 million in AoE, which is just insane. Like, look at this increase. It's actually crazy. We have not seen an increase this big, maybe since this Memory of Chaos, which, like I said, 6 million, 4 million to 9 million, 5 million, which already is a big amount, but going from 10 million and 7 million to 15 and 12 million is a bit insane. Now, what I will say is this enemy obviously does do some harm to themselves, choosing to an extent as well, but to be fair, for them to, so although the high HP amount is slightly deceiving, it doesn't take away from the fact that this is still increasing in difficulty, and it's exponentially as well in version 3. But, that's it for HP inflation. What I do, one of the main issues, which people have already begun to discuss as well, is how they have changed the design of Memory of Chaos. This is taking a bit of a broader look, but in the past, you used to have Memory of Chaos, which was mainly destruction units thrived in, then Pure Fiction released because Erudition units were underperforming, so they decided, let's make a Erudition endgame mode, and then to finish off the three, they also added in Apocalyptic Shadow for hunt characters. But now what we have seen is that Memory of Chaos, ever since, let's say, True Sting isn't exactly AoE, but AoE is very effective for it. I'd say ever since the Banana Boss in Rapper's release, we've seen a shift towards a more AoE meta, which we kind of expected because, the game will always try to chill out the newest character. Although this might now become, like, the biggest example of this. People always used to point towards the Firefly version, but which we will touch on in a bit when I talk about MOC buffs, but that's to be expected that they'd add in a lot of fire weakness because Firefly was like one of their main characters of version 2, so I guess it makes sense. But here they're changing the entire floor design of Memory of Chaos, whereas in the past, you'd think of Rapper as more of a Pure Fiction unit, but now she's good in both Pure Fiction and Memory of Chaos. You'd think she'd be good in Pure Fiction, then like decent / okay in Memory of Chaos, so, kind of like a character like Jade, where if their element is prominent, then they'll do decent, but they won't be excellent because, you know, they're a more AoE focused unit. But no, we saw that change, and that's more prevalent now in the 3.0 Memory of Chaos, because taking out this boss, you know, with single target characters is a struggle. And the problem here is that obviously, you know, changing the design of Memory of Chaos has just left some characters on the sideline. For example, I have not used Bootil in a while. Jingli maybe would be good because look at how much ice there is, but the problem is the HP numbers are just so high, and also on this half there is just so much AoE that once again she won't do as good as the Herta would, just because the Herta does higher numbers, which you need for the higher HP. And I mean, yeah, it really just sucks out here. If you have all E0 S0 characters, you are going to struggle to do damage in this MLC because the HP pools are just so high. And I feel like one of the benefits we had in the past was the memory turbulences. You know, back in the day, although, you know, nowadays I feel like the buffs are just way too restrictive. For example, here at the start of each cycle regenerates 20% energy for all ally characters. That's a small buff. Most characters don't need 20% energy. The exception being Aglaya, the Herta. And then also the fact that Memo Sprites take their action. If you don't have Aglaya, then the game's just saying, you know, lol XD cope, cry harder. Just pull better. That's what the game's saying. I mean, if we take a look at the past, if we find the Firefly one, because I believe this was the one people talked about the most. This would be the Bootil one, so this would be the Firefly one. You know, at the start of every wave cycle, summon one Trotter onto the field. They'll immediately be defeated when their weakness is broken, and then they will give you a buff of 15% attack and 30% break effect. And you know, people were saying this is insane for Firefly, but let's not forget, most characters in the game scale off attack. You know, Jing Yuan could be used here because lightning and attack buff. Same with Dunhung because he does have his imaginary weakness here. Yeah, physical weakness here, so Argenti could take advantage of the attack buff. And then obviously on both halves you could also use Acheron very well. And then the break effect buff was good for Firefly and Bootil. Now obviously the break effect buff here is stronger than the attack one. But you know, both were still viable. It still buffed both either way. And now if we take a look towards the next one, follow-up attack and or skills. Most characters use their skill at least once. Not all of them have a follow-up, but you know, Fei Xiao later would have a follow-up. Dr. Ratio has a follow-up. Yun Li has a follow-up. Topaz has a follow-up. So, you know, and this is adding stacks to the memory turbulence, which would deal extra hits. So basically, most characters could take advantage to this, although to varying levels of efficiency. Once again here, every time an attack is launched, it will deal more damage. Once again, all characters attack. So again, it's helping your entire team. Exo Toughness, this is where I feel like we started seeing a bit more specific buffs, although I feel like they were just experimenting with this more before Fugue released. And then once again here, Weakness Break, this is again, I'd also say this is where stuff started getting very focused, like the buffs really started shilling the newest characters. And then here, the 2.7 Memory of Chaos as well, I believe this was, you know, this is completely an FU to single target characters, because if you have like an E0 S0 Fei Xiao and Robin's ult isn't up, then the Trotters would just deal more damage than your Fei Xiao, so you might as well just, you know, kill the Trotters, and I don't think that's very engaging gameplay. So yeah, this was once again just completely a buff for HP characters, for AoE characters. And then if we go to the current one, once again, we've talked about how hyper-specific this is. So yeah, I feel like those cover the main three issues with Memory of Chaos. Obviously, you do have HP inflation, which since version 3.0 has gone crazy. The changing design of Memory of Chaos, I feel like it should have just been kept as a game mode where, you know, free targets is optimal, but then AoE and hunt units can still perform well in it, although the main beneficiaries are characters who can do blast attacks, but that is no longer the case. Now it just simply reflects whatever the meta wants to reflect, which right now is AoE and Memo Sprites. And then my biggest issue is the more restrictive buffs, because I feel like in the past you could get away with not pulling the feature character, but now they are really trying to sell you on the feature character. But yeah, those are my issues with Memory of Chaos, and let's move on to Pure Fiction. Alright, and here we are with Pure Fiction, this time with the version 3, Pure Fiction. Now, one thing I should mention is that Pure Fiction already got a redesign in order to make it more engaging, which I actually think they did a good job of, but then Pure Fiction also has some similar issues to Memory of Chaos, and Obviously, you know, you still have general HP inflation for pure friction. I am actually going to take a look at the HP chart because it is quite insane. So, you know, if we go down here, you know, you can see old pure friction here. And then this is kind of the point where they redesigned pure friction. The issue is that, you know, although the new buffs are stronger, so having higher HP pools does actually make sense. The problem is now they arguably are too high, because if we take a look at, you know, before we kind of had this massive rework, you know, we had the summons, they didn't have all too much HP. And then if we take a look here, you know, 175k HP and 7 mil on the main boss, it's not too bad. These are still manageable. But if we go to the most recent pure friction, as we can see, we have 1.1 million on Argenti, and then his summons have 394,000 and 229,000 HP respectively. If you don't have the Herta or a really strong Argenti, then you are screwed here. You know, in the past, pure friction used to be an easy game mode because you could just run Herta and Himiko. I've run different halves. Or play them on the same half and then play a different team, you know, maybe like an Acheron or a Jingyuan or whatever other character you had which performed decently in pure friction, and then you'd be fine. But nowadays, unless your Herta and Himiko are absolutely cracked, or, you know, if you try running a hyper carry Herta, then you're not going to have the best time on this half because these HP pools are absolutely insane, and I feel like this was done fully intentionally in order to shill the new version 3 characters, because, I mean, look, this jump from 13 mil to 25 million was because they redesigned pure friction. But this jump from 25 million to 32 million was just because they wanted to increase the HP pools in version 3. And that is crazy. And I really do feel like most of it was just to nerf the 3 characters which were really good in pure friction beforehand. So now you really need to pull new units for pure friction, otherwise you're in a bit of trouble. And, you know, it doesn't seem like these HP numbers are going down. The only thing they can do is give us stronger buffs. You know, I do like the redesign, but I feel like it's kind of pointless if you're just going to make the endgame mode infinitely harder. If this was just an excuse to bump up the HP pools incredibly, then I feel like that's a bit lazy. I feel like that was a really good opportunity here to make pure friction more fun, because I feel like in the past it was probably the worst of the endgame modes. It was seen as the most gimmicky, or just, you know, just the easiest, because like I said, you could just hurt a Himiko it and be done with it. But now, with the massive HP pools, it almost feels like no matter what you do, unless you pull the newest characters, then you're screwed. So, yeah, that is my issue with pure friction right now. Honestly, here the HP pools just kind of have to go down. Again, the buffs are going to favor the most recent characters released as well, although the difference here is you at least get to choose between 3, which, you know, offers you more freedom than Memory of Chaos, although, you know, it's arguably these are also quite specific, so, you know, maybe not the best, but, you know, sometimes you just gotta take what you're given. And I feel like I said, pure friction's biggest issue right now is just how much they bumped up the HP. And finally, that moves us onto the version 3.1 Apocalyptic Shadow, which I have actually been able to clear, although only with very specific teams. And again, you know, let's just get the elephant out of the room. There has been a bit of HP inflation as well. I am about to look at the chart, which does contain a spoiler for the 3.2 Apocalyptic Shadow. But here, as you can see, HP has slowly been going up in Apocalyptic Shadow. I don't actually think it's been as bad as in the other endgame modes. I actually feel like Apocalyptic Shadow has suffered the least from HP inflation. This only goes up here because this boss has an insane amount of HP, although one might say, you know, this boss having 5.5 million HP, whereas 2 times ago it just had 4.6 million HP, so that's 9.2 million versus 11 million within the space of just 2 versions. So there is definitely a bit of HP inflation, but you know, I don't want to overstate it here, and then I'm pretty sure this goes down because I don't think we're gonna have any bosses which damage themselves in the next Apocalyptic Shadow, but don't let that deceive you. I feel like the main issue Apocalyptic Shadow has been suffering rather than HP inflation is the fact that they have just kind of ruined our expectation of what Apocalyptic Shadow is supposed to be. When we heard of Apocalyptic Shadow, we thought it was going to be a hunt game mode. We thought single target characters were going to be king here, but it turns out that's not always going to be the case, because this boss is very AoE centric, like very. If you don't have Jingyuan, Acheron, Rappa, or the Herta, you're in big trouble. And even if you do have those, they need to be well built or well invested in, unless it's the Herta, or because, you know, she just does insane damage. Rappa, I'm not 100% sure how she performs. I've actually seen some people saying it's not perfect, but I actually still feel like she should be pretty good, especially if you have a premium team here. But then that also premium teams is an issue I do want to talk about slightly later on when I talk about is it becoming impossible to become free to play and clear endgame modes a little bit later on. But yeah, kind of as I was saying, we expected Apocalyptic Shadow to be full hunt. It turns out it's a bit more weakness break focused than we thought originally, and then now most criminally they have changed it to AoE. So not only have we had this boss, I feel like this boss was a real kicker as well, because this is again Rapper, Argenti, the Hurter, and I mean you can run Jade here as well. You know, I feel like Fantilia here is doing fine, Aventrine's doing fine, because these are kind of the bosses you would expect in Apocalyptic Shadow, but then these AoE bosses I feel like are just a bit scummy, if I'm being entirely honest. Also, we have some pretty specific buffs. For example, here, this buff, this will only apply to the Hurter. If you wanted to make this easier for people, you could make this, you know, just an ice damage increase, which we have seen before in Apocalyptic Shadow. If we go back to the Aventrine one here, you know, you just have characters ice damage increased by 55%. You know, if we had a buff like this here, then, you know, this could make Jing Liu better, but, you know, turns out, no, there are no buffs here for Jing Liu. But they do have a physical one, because the only character, you know, Yun Li and Argenti will take advantage of this. But, you know, RIP Bootil, because this, try using Bootil here, it's not going to go too well, because you really want some AoE in this one. Also, his crowd control is a bit insane as well, because even the small summons can CC you, which is, again, just sucks. And then you also have this weakness break one, which, you know, technically is decent for Bootil, but again, he's very single target. And you'd think this is his best endgame mode, but no, this is basically entirely a Rapper buff. And then again, if we go over to Aventrine here, you know, this is supposed to be a blade buff, although at least I feel like it's supposed to be a blade buff. I'm not sure who else it would be for, because, you know, it's not for the Hurter, it's not for Jing Liu, that's for certain. You know, there's no Jing Liu buffs here, even though he's weak to ice. Last time we did see one, this time we don't. And again, only increasing basic attack damage, whereas Blade increase, you know, Blade, a lot of his damage also comes from his alt and follow-up, so it's not even a great buff for him. Obviously, this is a very good one for Fei Xiao. Fei Xiao will take great advantage of this, and then increasing the speed, I guess, is a universal one. I used it on Bootil. There is no weakness break one here again, so yeah, I guess they just really don't like Bootil. Whereas here, it's more obvious that, you know, who these characters are supposed to be for. I almost feel like this could be a Jing Liu one, but then try using Jing Liu against this AoE boss, it's not going to go amazingly, especially if they're E0 or S0. So yeah, I feel like the design of Apocalyptic Shadow, both in terms of buffs, as well as them making it more AoE rather than being a hunt, as we would have hoped in the past, just makes it so that now hunt characters are, you know, kind of dead in the ditch. Not exactly, because, you know, they'll at least be good on one side, but if you try using, like, Fei Xiao Bootil, you're really going to have to try to make them work on one of the sides, because in the last 3 Apocalyptic Shadows, it's been very AoE-centric. So, yeah, I feel like Apocalyptic Shadow has also let us down in the design, and with that being said, let's now look at all 3 endgame modes, kind of in a vacuum. Alright, well, now that we've taken a look at all 3 endgame modes, let's consider the question that, you know, you see in the title, and that's, is it becoming impossible to be free-to-play in Honkai Star Rail? Now, if you want a very literal answer to that, it's no, just don't spend money. But what I'm actually trying to ask here is, you know, is it becoming impossible to be a free-to-play in HSR who pulls for their favorite characters while still being able to clear the endgame modes? And the answer to that, I'd say, is maybe not quite yet, yes, but it's going in that direction. Because, you know, if some of your favorite characters are Blade, Dunhung, Jing Liu, maybe you're newer to the game, then you're going to have a lot of catching up to do. It's the point where if you're newer to the game, you might as well just pull for the Hurter, and then whatever the strongest Memo Sprite character is going to be. Casterus is looking like she will also be well, we know she's a Remembrance Unit, so she's probably going to have a Memo Sprite as well. And that's the current meta, Erudition and Memo Sprites. You know, kind of how we had Follow-Up and Break back in version 2. So yeah, it's kind of becoming harder to pull for the characters you really like, because you are going to struggle to clear the endgame modes. It's now becoming, you know, do you want to pull it complete for meta so that you can full star all the endgame modes and feel like you're getting everything you can out of the game? Or just pull your favorite characters, but then the game kind of has less meaning then, because, you know, a lot of people's goal is to clear the hardest content, and if you can't do that, then, you know, why care? For example, I just stopped bothering with full starring the 3.0 Memory of Chaos or Pure Fiction, and if I didn't feel like I was close to clearing the 3.1 Apocalyptic Shadow, then I also would have quit, because I just feel like it's not worth my time. So, when my day releases, maybe I'll try him and see if he can help me clear those modes. But if not, then I'm just not going to bother getting full stars, whereas in the past, that was one of my favorite things to do in the game. Now that all 3 endgame modes are kind of tailored to the current meta, I mean, the biggest losers we've seen right now are Hunt. I had a lot of people asking me, should I pull for Faye Xiao? I really like her as a character, but I feel like I'm never going to use her because Hunt just seems really bad right now. And, my answer was still just pull for whoever you want. We'll probably see Hunt return one day. So that's always my advice, pull for whoever you want. But it's becoming harder to give that advice because, now some characters are just falling out of the meta, and it's purely because of game design, not even because of character design. And you're also pressured to pull for the newest characters, as well as stuff like their light cones as well. So it's becoming increasingly harder to pull for characters you like, because maybe you need their light cone, maybe you need their premium team as well. For example, Bootle, back when he released in a team of Ruan Mei, Harmony MC, and Gallagher, he was very strong. But if you try running that team now, it's going to do much worse than if you have Fugue and Linksha. It's still going to be viable sometimes, especially if there's imaginary weakness. But if there isn't, then, your Bootle's going to struggle more. And Bootle's not even a year old. He's slowly coming up on a year, but, not yet. I feel like characters shouldn't need their premium team to perform to that, to a level which can clear endgame modes even a year before they release. I feel like a character, maybe E0, S0 without the premium team should, stay meta relevant for about a year. Maybe later on, if you want them to stay beyond that, maybe then you need to pull their full premium team, or like an E1 or an S1, but you shouldn't feel forced to do that from the get-go. But that's just how things are looking right now. I almost feel like, do I want to pull, for example, for Remembrance units if I don't have Sunday? Am I just going to get a worse gameplay experience? So I'd say it is becoming increasingly difficult to be a free-to-play who pulls for characters they like and still clear the endgame modes. And I feel like that will kill the fun of a lot of people, because if they can't pull their favorite characters and play the endgame modes, then what? They're just going to come back to the game for the story, pull the characters they like, and then not touch the game until they can repeat that cycle for the most part. So I feel like it's bad for the game. I feel like players aren't enjoying it. I certainly aren't enjoying not being able to clear the endgame modes, probably until I pull more version 3 characters. Like as soon as I get my day, then I'm probably going to be able to clear the Memory of Chaos, as well as basically most of the content that's coming out, especially when I pull Casterus. It was similar when I got Akron. She carried me throughout all of version 2 to clearing every endgame mode. But now even my E0, S0 Akron, even though I do have Jiacho, is slowly falling off. I know some people are going to say, all characters getting buffed, but we don't know how those buffs are going to look, so, I don't want to rely on that too much. So I do feel like nowadays, if you're an F2P not pulling for all of the newest meta units, then you can't expect to clear every single endgame mode, which is a shame, because I feel like in the past, you were able to. Now, what do I think they need to change? First of all, I think we need to stop designing endgame modes in a way which is made to only promote the newest characters. It's supposed to be more of a challenge, rather than a way to get people to pull your newest characters. People should be pulling for characters because they like them, not because it will save them in the current endgame modes. So go back to making sure that Pure Fiction is best for AoE, make sure that Apocalyptic Shadow is still best for more single target characters, and that Memory of Chaos is more of an in-between. Also make sure that the buffs in all aren't too restrictive and aren't just limited to the latest character. Make sure, they need to be designed in a way which is friendly with previously released characters, so that they're more viable. And then we also need to slow the rate at which HP is increasing as well. I feel like if you do those, then the endgame will be at a much healthier state, and the players will be less frustrated with the game, and maybe less will be quitting the game as well, because I feel like we have seen a bit of that starting to happen. A lot of people are venting their frustrations, and if nothing changes, then they are just gonna quit. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think down below. Keep it civil. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Let's have a friendly discussion, I think. But with that being said, hope you enjoyed, found this helpful, and see ya.